Recently, I paid the former Deputy Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, Dikgang Moseneke, at his home. We had a chat about a whole lot of things, and one such topic was the aspirations of the Constitution. I'm talking to the former Deputy Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, Dikgang Moseneke, and we are very fortunate to be able to talk to him. And this is the second part of the interview that we are having with him. A towering figure in public life in South Africa, in legal circles, and even socially, if I may say. And he's here talking to us. I appreciate very much your time, sir. Thank you. Your life has always been in the legal field, basically, right? Influenced more by the political activism on your part as an individual. Do you feel that throughout your career you've been politically active, that as much as you spoke about the Constitution being the ground rules and a judge being the referee and so forth, but at the same time, somewhere there must have been some activism in you anyway, that was always rearing its head here or there?
Yes, in many ways, yes. One could say, I recall Mahatma Gandhi, who said, struggle is my life. Mm-hmm. Out of Robben Island, as I was preparing to become an attorney, you remember the fights that one had. Wanted to break into the profession, to go to court and litigate. And if you remember at the time, they said I couldn't become an attorney. The excuse was that I was a citizen of Botswana and I'd lost my South African citizenship. And the law said only South African citizens could become attorneys. With that fight, I won it at the court, and I was admitted as an attorney. Went to the bar. Pretoria bar said only white people could practice there, and kick the door down, open, practice there. Alongside that, there was a waging struggle, remember. Remember when I was admitted there in 1976, 77? What was happening? The country was on fire. People of my age, young people, that's why I shouldn't be overly singled out. Young people were out there marching, challenging bantu education, challenging being compelled to study in Afrikaans against their will, and so on. So as I got into the profession, I mean, excuse me, I became an ambulance of the struggle, if you like. Kids were being shot and killed. I remember Garankuwa appeared in Soshanguve, in Mabopane, at Medunsa appeared for students right across the current Middelburg, Mamelodi, all the time. And literally all of them knew, once they were arrested with all these riots, somebody Dikgang Moseneke. And you have to run out to get them out so they can go back to school. And I couldn't say to them, don't rise against the regime. But I did say to them, education is central. So you must fight and study and fight and study and fight and study, which exemplified my own life. I thought you must always fight and study. You know, you cannot give up trying to change the system, but you cannot stop studying either. So you do both. So my life was closer, and when we had a lot of incursions, and if you remember, MK cadres came in and they were arrested. Many came through Botswana and were arrested. And I appeared in countless MK trials, many UPLA trials. I appeared in the Eastern Cape, in KZN, Mpumalanga, after the Nkomati Accord, for instance, when many of MK cadres came through. Most of those I defended, together with Posa and Mujapilu and a range of others. So just to get to the point and summarize it, yes. Throughout that time, I was in constant contact with underground structures, trying to get messages about people who may be arrested and to try and save their lives in detention. Now, you know, it's old hat. I defended Dr. Ribeiro with George Bezos, and they killed him thereafter, once he had been found not guilty. Defended Zwelakhe Sisulu, defended Tamima Zwai. I'm citing some of your colleagues in the media. defended. So, people like Ingwapele Madingwana, if you remember, the poet, Africa My Beginning, has arrested countless times and defended him. Mainly black consciousness activists and Azanla activists, those I defended also. So, yes, the struggle was, my practice was nothing more than basically using the law to defend and advance the positions of those who resisted apartheid, who were very much in the same position that I was.
When you think of the different positions, from being attorney, advocate, and even a business leader for that matter, and a judge, ultimately, what are the key things that stand out for you as highlights of your life story from your own point of view? That besides the cases that you've mentioned.
Yes, difficult to pick out on what it would be. I think being part of writing the Constitution was a big privilege. And it's often not understood, Tim. I consciously resigned from politics. Remember in 1992, thereabouts, I resigned from active member and participation in the PAC, open-eyed and consciously, because I really made the choice that I don't want to go to Parliament. Negotiations are going on, there's going to be elections. I rather would like to become a lawyer and maybe something else in practice. So there's a conscious, and that is why it was possible for me to go and help write the Constitution, run the elections, as you remember, as deputy chair of the IEC. So I consciously chose, if I wanted to, I could have gone to Parliament. I mean, in 1994, I would have been elected, I would have been quite high up on the list of whatever organization I might have stood for. I would have gone to Parliament. And from there, my career may have evolved along the political lines. But I actually consciously decided to become a lawyer. And I think that allowed me, those would be two high points: writing the Constitution, helping write, and running the elections. Those were quite important, and going back to practice, legal practice, as other people went to Parliament.
You mentioned something earlier about young people, that you defended them and they were marching, demonstrating. How do you feel about the role of young people in modern day South Africa? We're a democracy now, and to some of us, most definitely a person like yourself who's been to Robben Island and has seen so many struggles of people and defended them, we would think that the elections of '94 and the ushering in of a democratic system is the pinnacle of everything, that we are okay now, we are free. But young South Africans, particularly African, seem agitated and unhappy about a whole lot of things. What do you think about the way they're going about making their issues and agitations known by those in power?
You see, I understand the arguments that young people make. In part, I share the anxiety, the impatience and irritation. It is not unreasonable for young people under freedom to expect that they would have employment opportunities, that they'll have access to quality education, and that they will be included in the economic activity of their land, and that they will see progressively reduction of poverty, of exclusion, of ill health. So that, after all, was a promise of 1994. And they argue that not enough has been done. And that is exemplified by the large number of young people who are basically excluded. So I have much sympathy for that. In fact, if our young people were not restless, I would be worried. And they're entitled to say, And 1994 has not delivered as much as it ought to have. And quite often I feel the same way too. And that also moved me where I work to make sure that for my part, I try and do as much as I can to deliver that promise of 1994. Where I part ways is with the means with which we deal and articulate that concern. And that debate should be had about how do you best hold those who exercise power accountable.
But here's another point related to the very question I've just asked. We have more than 40 plus protests taking place in the nation today on a daily basis, so service delivery related. Does that surprise you? What does that tell you about the state of South Africa?
No, it doesn't surprise me. You know, remember Tata Mandela, let me go back to that to answer the question, saying my generation has given you guys the power in a democratic setting. You guys have to go out there and do your damnedest to make your people better than where they are. So that duty to bring people first, which I applied in my terrain. And some people were angry when I said, what matters is what, what's good for the people. Okay? Not what's good for the powerful and the mighty, is what's good for the people. So the same principle applies. We have to go out there, we have to do more about access to healthcare, to quality healthcare, and reliable and consistent healthcare. We must go out there and go and access to education, not just any education, one that will be valuable. And we must take active steps, I think, to create access for young people into the economy. Not in an electioneering stance, in a real, thoughtful way. And I have some ideas, which I don't want to spend your time here on. But there are things that can be done that can change the lot of young people.
Right, and of course we've got those protests, they are there. They are evidence that people are unhappy about a whole number of things. And this calls for an urgent way of dealing with some of the points that you've mentioned. Now, the Constitution is there, we've spoken about transformation. What about the racial tensions, the reconciliation factor? When you look at what's going on and the discourse in our society regarding that, what do you think? I mean, the Constitution is supposed to be the document that helps facilitate that reconciliation. And it looks like progress is very slow, or it's actually sometimes feels like we're regressing.
You see, you can't have reconciliation in the air. You can't have reconciliation in a vacuum. It must be, translated into practical steps. We must reduce inequality. The Constitution commands us to. And we must identify the steps that will get us there. Education is just one area. Access to clean water and sanitation is a very important part of equality. Either you have toilet with running water or not. And if this one has and this one doesn't have, they're not quite on equal footing. Because something vital, they need it daily in their lives. So we must identify those things that will help equalize society. Access to proper housing, which is a place where we bring up our children, give them opportunity to go and take on the world and so on. So we who have public power must, beyond lip service, respect the resources that are placed in our hands and use them for the purposes that they are meant. Better schools, better that. And this must be a national mantra. We must all rally around the notion that we're going to better lives, and in a practical way. Better schools.
But here's a quick argument, and you can be brief in your response to this.
Yes.
The other argument is that you cannot depend on government alone to bring about those changes in a faster, more urgent manner if business is not participating And the argument is that it is white-owned, therefore a very reluctant partner in bringing about faster change in South
Yes,
Africa.
there may be some level of reluctance. I agree about that. But let me tell you something. If you have a well-formulated Marshall Plan that rallies the whole nation around vitals, and that would also rally business, it can be done. These things are not oppositional. I mean, look how quickly water and sewage and things get brought into commercial developments for housing. Huh? You go there, it's all there. You can see the roads and the tar roads and the pavements, and it's all there. So it can be brought together quite quickly and effectively. And there must be midways there in which these things can be done.
Yes.
Just as an example, where business and government could actually go up there and say, how do we bring water to all depressed neighborhoods? How do we light up those neighborhoods? How do we... Once you ask those questions, you're going to help kickstart the economy in a very vital way. So I think both actually should be out there to do that.
I want to go back to yourself. And I've been fortunate enough to know you over so many years and look up to you like many younger people who know you and manage to have a relationship with you. And we appreciate your influence as a big brother and a leader.
No,
Modise. And I've observed that some of the elders, you refer to Nelson Mandela, I recall Dr. Motlana and Ntate Motsuenyane.
Yes.
They, as much as they are senior to you or were senior to you, have a high value trust relationship with you. They trusted you a lot. How do you feel about that? I mean, I knew how much they were fond of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been very lucky. I mean, when Tatim Soyane had something serious to be done, and he would say, Mugwen, let's come and do this. And Tatim Motlana invited me, basically, again. He invited me to leave law and come and join NAIL. And I became CEO of NAIL, if you remember, working under him as my chairman.
Yes.
Tatim Mandela asked me to go and run Nelson Mandela Children's Fund for him. 15 years later, it's a star story. There's a hospital standing right up in Parktown. I mean, all that came from all that activity. So, yes. And Dr. Mandela, as you know, asked me, in his will, please look after me, when I'm not here. So, yes, I've had the privilege of having all these very dedicated community leaders trusting and believing that I could help. And I think two things. One is plain industry, Tim. Just working hard at the job that you have. You have a job, do it thoroughly, properly, and everybody will notice and see. Two, I think there must always be integrity in that process. We raised, when I retired from Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, we had 800 million rand that we raised so that we can have it in perpetuity. It was under my command and control. I didn't take even a penny. Not even once did I have that notion and sense and temptation to go and fly on it on first class to go somewhere or something like that. So somehow elderly people know of those small, simple but important values. As they interact with people, they say, this young man is prepared to dedicate, in other words, industry, work hard. He's prepared to serve his people and do it for others, run for himself, and he's prepared to do it honestly. I was at Telkom, appointed by Tata Mandela to go and help restructure Telkom. I controlled billions of rands. And Tim, I was there, I left there. You can go and sniff as hard as you like. In fact, I had many farewell functions and parties, and I didn't think that any of that should really accrue to me personally. So somehow people know it, and they sense it and know when people will act honestly and with dedication.
Parting shot from you, and you will speak at some places. I'm sure you'll convey the same message, but in the context of this interview, if there's one key thing you'd like to share with your fellow South Africans that is very close to your heart, and particularly younger South Africans. We always want to learn from those who've gone before us, our elders. If there's one key message and lesson we must take away from you, what is it?
I think every person is his or her own liberator. You've heard me say that before. And not only liberation from racism and colonialism and the usual things, but also the immediate restrictions that one finds in one's circumstance. I really think there's a big space for personal agency in society, but also a big space for collective agency. Okay? Individuals must be ready to go out there and try and do things that will move them from one place where they are and don't want to be to another place where they want to be, where they are not but want to be. I think that is quite vital. We must always go out there and try and make sure that we hold those who have public power accountable, that we want to identify the things that we can do together, and that we bring hard work to it without always anticipating others to do things for them, and bring elements of honesty and integrity to it. Think if we were able to, for instance, preserve all the funds we have as a nation in this country and really make them work for our people, how far would we have been, Tim? We'd have done far more than what we have achieved. And I'm not suggesting nothing has been achieved. A lot has been achieved since 1994. But much, much more could have been achieved.
Dikgang Moseneke, ke a leboga.
Yeah, Modise, thank you and good luck in what you're doing.
Ke a leboga.
This is my last interview. It's time for me to go and rest and do a few wonderful things, like climbing mountains and go and see all of Africa and traveling all around the world.
Thank you very much, former Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke, for talking to us. And there you are, the story of a man that goes for decades. It's just a summary. We could not talk about everything else, but had to raise some of those issues that we believe and think are of public importance, and we appreciate that he shared his own views and insights with us on our program. Thank you.